Hi, I'm David Morgenroth, and I'm in the faculty of the University of Montana in the jazz department. I'm a jazz piano player, and I'd like to talk a little bit about playing piano for a big band. Basically, we're going to get down to the sorts of things that will help you get a better result as a piano player in a big band. So first of all, if you're going into a big band rehearsal, I don't know what the piano is going to be like. You may be playing a keyboard, but ultimately, you're coming in, you could be coming from a class, you could be coming from a rehearsal, you may not have played the piano at all, so you might need to warm up a little bit and probably won't have the chance to do any kind of real warm-up. So you'll probably want to try to at least get your body ready, and of course here we're in Montana, it is February. It's not the coldest day that we've had, but it's not outside of the realm of possibility that you walk into a rehearsal or a concert with cold hands. So it's a good thing to be prepared for that eventuality, and one of the things you can do is just try to move your body a little bit, move your shoulders a little bit, back and forth, this sort of thing. You can grab the side of the piano and stretch, some stretches, try to move your hands a little bit, these sorts of things, and just get some blood going into your hands. It's really tough to play the piano when you have really cold hands. So eventually, of course, you will warm your hands up when you play, but who knows? The room might be really cold too, and that may not happen. So one of the things that I would recommend to everyone, I do it myself, I carry around these little hand warmers that usually hunters and fishermen buy at a sporting goods store. They can be really handy because they've got some chemicals in them, and you open the package and they create heat. And one of the things that is often a problem is finding a heat source in a cold room with cold hands. So once you're ready to go and the conductor or the band director decides that the rehearsal is going to begin, you'll probably be handed a piece of music. And this is a perfect situation. I was just handed this piece of music. This tune is called A Little Tear. It's by a keyboard player that I used to listen to in the 70s. His name is Deodato. He's a Brazilian player. And it's arranged by Rob Horsting. And one of the things that you want to do is have a way of going about parsing what's in a chart really quickly, because you throw a chart like this up and you start reading, and there are all sorts of pitfalls that may come along. So a couple of things before you look at the music, you just want to be aware of whether there's a coda. So there may be a sign somewhere. So you'll find yourself at the end of the chart, and you have to go back to the sign, and if you don't know where that sign is, it'll be a problem. Because one of the things about music, as you probably already know, is that it happens in real time. You don't have an extra few seconds or whatnot to get back to that sign. So this particular chart, the sign happens to be right on the front page. So we know that that is where we're going to have to get back to from somewhere near the end. So if we go all the way to the back, yep, well there it is, DS all coda. So this is pretty simple, really. The sign is easy to get to, it's the first page, and the coda's on the last page. One of the things about piano charts that is always vexing is that they are often very long. This is 6 pages, and this is the way it was handed to me. So there's page 1 and 2. Here's page 3, 4, 5, 6. They're barely held together. So you know right away that you're going to possibly have a problem with a chart like this. So one of the things you know you're going to have to do once you get out of rehearsal is you're going to have to tape these pages together so that they're not falling all over the place. Of course, you want to check out the key signature. This is in cut time, and it's a Latin tune, so all that information's right at the front of the chart. And what do you know? Right at the front of the chart, it says solo. So you have to be prepared to play a solo right from the very beginning. It looks like it's about 16 bars. Just a couple chord changes, so it's not particularly difficult, but nonetheless, if this is the first thing you play and your hands are cold and you have to play solo right off the bat, not easy. Then just quickly parse through and see, are there figures that I have to play? So figures could be either rhythmic figures with chords, which you'll generally play with the band at large, or certainly with the rhythm section, or figures that are single note lines. Single note lines are the trickiest in these piano charts because they kind of come out of nowhere. So knowing where they are is a good plan of action. And sure enough, pages 2 and 3, you probably can't see this, but there are a bunch of single note lines. It doesn't tell you who you're playing these single note lines with, probably with someone, maybe the first alto or the trumpet or a combination thereof, or it could be all, you could be all by yourself. So just keep that in mind. Might want to just take a look, real quickly scan these lines because they're syncopated, lots of offbeats, and just kind of get a leg up on reading them. Then the other thing, of course, you always want to look for repeats. If there are repeated sections, where they go back to. This is akin to the DS all coda or maybe a DC all coda. DC goes back to the very beginning. And sure enough, on page 4, there is a repeat. And usually these repeats are solo sections. This is not going to be your solo, but we've got a mark in here that says 3 times. So it's not just a regular repeat, but you repeat it 3 times. The end repeat is on page 5, and you go back. First time tacit, so you're out. Tacit means out. And usually with these repeats, you'll have first and second endings. So that first ending will actually be played twice because we're doing this 3 times. And in the second ending, you skip from that first ending, beginning of the first ending, to the second ending. And then, what do you know, at the very end, before the DS, you've got another repeat. That one's just twice, looks like. And so, back to the DS, and then you take the coda. So that took all of, I don't know, that process, of course, I was talking through it, but it could take all of 30 seconds to really get an idea of what's going on in the chart. But it's really valuable to have this sort of speed reading idea when you first look at a chart. Just check it out as quickly as you can and see where the problems may lie, okay? So that's a quick look at a possible chart that you might play. Every chart is different. But it's really helpful to take a quick look if I would find where the skeletons are buried. Of course, you're going to find a lot of different stuff in charts. You're going to see chord symbols, and maybe you don't know what those chord symbols are. Sometimes chords are actually written out, and sometimes when the chords are written out, they're not particularly good voicings of those chords. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on in here. Don't ever feel afraid to talk to the band director about what a symbol means or what a chord symbol signifies. You can see slash chords, you can see polychords, so slash chord has a slash in the middle of one chord symbol over another. That means that the symbol on the bottom is a root note in the bass. If it's a horizontal line and 2 chords, it means it's a polychord. Each one of those chords needs to be played. But we're not going to get into too much chord symbol technical stuff today. We can do that another time. But just be aware that there are times when there will be chord symbols that you haven't seen before, and don't be afraid to ask questions about them. Another thing, of course, certain charts like Sami-Nestigo charts or Count Basie charts are classic Basie charts where at the very end you're going to have a little solo and it's going to be completely exposed. So definitely check that out and make sure that you nail it, because everybody's going to know if you don't. So working with the guitarist is one part of working with the rhythm section, and the rhythm section, of course, it should be a cohesive unit. Another chordal instrument, either guitar, vibraphone, whatever, could be another keyboard for all that matters, and bass and drums. And one facet of playing with the rhythm section and playing in a big band in general is that if you're playing the piano, you do not have a volume knob. In other words, you physically are generating the sound, and you're competing with other instruments that are amplified. Guitars will certainly be amplified. The bass will generally be amplified. And the drums are already capable of playing louder than just about anybody. So you will be competing on a volume level with everyone. And then of course the big band has a huge dynamic range. So there are going to be times when you're playing the piano in rehearsal without amplification where you can't hear yourself and nobody can hear you as well. And that of course is a problem. And most piano players, I for one, when I was in my teens and into my 20s, would try to compensate by just trying to play louder. And most of the time, pianos aren't going to give you that extra volume level. Most pianos have a cap on how loud they can be played. And the more you dig into it, the more you pound on a piano, the less effective you will be as a piano player. Because you're not going to get anything more out of the piano. No one's going to hear you any better. And you're just going to be putting out far more energy and effort for no gain. So ultimately, you can consider it a no-win situation, but you have to realize that every time you play the piano, whether you can hear yourself or not, it's being fed into your neurological system. Meaning, if you spend the time in a rehearsal where you know you're not being heard most of the time, and you spend it goofing off, playing whatever, not concentrating, all this sort of thing, it feeds into your neurological impulse that says this is okay. And where that comes back to haunt you is when you go up on stage for a concert, and if you've been doing this chronically for a number of weeks or even months, you get on stage, you realize the piano is mic'd, you probably have a monitor, so you can hear yourself really well. In fact, you can hear everything you play, and so can everybody else. And ultimately, you realize this strategy hasn't paid off because you're not ready for the concert. You haven't been concentrating in rehearsal, and you've gotten away with a lot of stuff. Piano players have this ability to get away with a lot of stuff because in many, many cases, even with an electronic instrument, we tend to play below the surface instead of above. You want to develop a level of confidence in your playing, and the way you do that is you've got to use your head. It's a mental exercise to play any music, ultimately. The mental feeds the physical. It's not the other way around. We as piano players play a very physical instrument, obviously, and it's the touch, the tactical sense, that often feeds a lot of information into our brains, and we like the feedback. We like to play particularly good pianos. They feel good. The physicality of it feels good. It's actually very athletic. But when you don't have the feedback of hearing yourself, you tend to not pay attention to that feedback. And so I'm advocating that you try to concentrate through rehearsals as much as you possibly can, even if you're not able to hear yourself. Because again, this neurological feedback loop is very, very important. And it's important not only to become a better player, but it's also concomitantly important to develop confidence in what you're playing. If you're actually concentrating on what you're playing, even though you can't hear it, you can hear it in your inner ear. You have to create an imagination. So if you play a chord change with a voicing that doesn't fit the chord, you have to develop this other feedback loop, which doesn't involve the actual sound, but the imagined sound, that the thing that you're playing, say in your left hand, doesn't jive with the chord change. And therefore you're playing a wrong voicing, and you have to fix that. You have to fix that on an imagination level, and that the sound is not going to be right with what you're playing. This is an ongoing development for all of us as piano players, and frankly, for any instrumentalist, because there will always, for anyone, there will always be a time where you can't hear yourself. There are plenty of venues out there that were not very well designed for musical performance. And it could be the acoustics of the place. It could be that you're set up in a way that you're a mile away from the drums. Maybe the acoustics of the place make the drums even louder and more diffuse, so you can't hear the time. And this is going to happen a lot. It happens a lot to everyone. And so this level of confidence, and confidence in being able to play a good time without exactly knowing if that, say the monitor isn't working and you're in a concert, what are you going to do? Well, if you've developed this feedback system neurologically, you know what, your ear is driving what you're playing on the piano. It's not the other way around. So I would highly recommend this kind of mental practice. And frankly, big band rehearsal is a perfect place to develop this sort of thing. With a keyboard, of course, you have the electronic signal, so you have control. You have the volume knob, just like the other players in the rhythm section, and therefore you can, quote-unquote, compete. I would say that a lot of keyboard players, a lot of piano players, through not concentrating during rehearsals, go to a keyboard and turn the volume down so they can't be heard. So it's, apples to apples, because they don't have the confidence. They haven't built the confidence in what they're playing, and so they don't want to be heard. You never want to go down this road. This is not the kind of psychological and neurological situation that you want to develop in yourself. You want to always believe that you're being heard and develop that inner ear so that you know when you're playing, the kinesthetic or tactical sense, what you're feeling physically, lines up in your mind with what you're hearing. Again, this may be a little conceptual, but it applies directly to big band playing, because I played in numerous different big bands and a number of very loud big bands with a number of loud drummers and loud rhythm sections. And the fact of the matter is, I'd say 75% of the time in rehearsal, I couldn't be heard. But knowing that you will be heard in the concert brings a different level of concentration to the rehearsal. And you know that whatever you play, you've got to be 100% committed and behind what you play. It's really important to think about this and not goof off in rehearsal just because nobody can hear you. Eventually somebody can't hear you. Often what will happen is that the band director will cut the band off and say, I can't hear the rhythm section well. Rhythm section alone. And maybe that rhythm section alone has a bunch of lines in it. Tough lines that you haven't gone to the woodshed on because you don't think anybody's listening. And suddenly, everything's cut out and you got that line solo. And then everybody knows that you haven't been shedding the line, that you can't play it. And those are situations that can be avoided. And you want to avoid those situations. And the way you avoid those situations is that you shed everything in the book, everything in all of these charts, and make sure that you've got it solid. I would also recommend, and this doesn't happen in any kind of routine way, that you as a piano player take a leadership role in the rhythm section and try to schedule some rehearsals for the rhythm section alone. It's often the case, I've seen it over and over, where bones are going to rehearse, the saxophones rehearse, the trumpets go off and rehearse, and the rhythm section doesn't rehearse. Because the rhythm section thinks they've already got it nailed. And it's rarely the case that the rhythm section's got it nailed, because a lot of this stuff is really difficult. And yeah, the rhythm section may not be playing a lot of lines and stuff, but hey, if the rhythm section isn't gelling, like I say, coalescing, all the players playing with the same idea about what the time feel is, a lot of things can go wrong. And if things are going wrong in the rhythm section, the horns aren't gonna help, because the rhythm section is the foundation of the big band. So the rhythm section should rehearse and go through all these tunes, checking out what the feel is like, what if something feels wrong, what's going on, and it's not a blame game, but it's a solution-oriented type of rehearsal where we pick spots that are maybe problematic or grooves that are problematic and just play the groove for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes, and find a way to find this good feeling. It's also good to sit down with rhythm section players and listen to music. You alone, the piano player, should be listening to music all the time. And this is where you're going to get the clues as to what feels good and what doesn't. Not everything that's recorded feels good. And sit down with the rhythm section and have a listening session and listen to a variety of stuff, not just big band music, but quartets, trios, this sort of thing. And try to find some common ground as to how we look at time and how we look at time feel. This would be really great for the big band as a whole, because when you go off and do this sort of thing, you build bonds, for one, and then you come back as a unit again. And I can tell you that the band and the directors will be able to feel it. It will make a real difference. So, in conclusion, just like to go over some of the points that I brought out in this video. Number one, you show up to your rehearsal, and if your hands are cold, you want to try to warm up in some way, shape, or form. Stretch out a little bit. And then when you're handed a piece of music, you want to speed read through it just really quickly and check out where the coda is, where the sign is, if there are signs and codas or a DC or whatnot, where repeats are, if somebody's marked in there 3 times or 4 times on a repeat. Speak up, ask the band director, is this good? Is this 4 times at F, for example, good? And check out where you have solos. And then, very importantly, check out where you have lots of figures and stuff. Just so you know they're there, because these things sneak up on you. And one thing that I didn't mention, if you haven't spent a lot of time sight reading, it's all about moving your eyes. Your eyes have to be ahead. You can't be in the place of the music that is being played on the page and be an effective sight reader. You always have to be ahead. A couple of beats, maybe a measure, try to go as far ahead as you possibly can. But ultimately, you have to move your eyes forward, move your eyes forward. Always, that's kind of the mantra. You'll become very much a better sight reader if you just move your eyes forward. I actually learned that from an ophthalmologist. So reading charts obviously is important. You want to focus on style, being able to play in good time feel. You want to have a good relationship with the guitarist or the vibraphonist or anyone else who's playing a chordal instrument so that you don't get in each other's way. You want to coalesce with the other rhythm section players, so you're playing good time with the bass and drums, and you're playing generally in the same place. You want to consider that the piano is not going to be a very effective instrument from a volume standpoint versus the big band versus the amplified rhythm section. So you want to make sure that you don't pound at the piano for no good reason. By the same token, you want to make sure during rehearsals when maybe you can't be heard that you're playing something that's viable, playing something that actually fits the music, and you're not making mistakes or playing bad time just because no one can hear you, because that'll come back to bite you. And again, take a leadership role as the piano player, not in any explicit way, but just get the rhythm section to get together and rehearse, try to get grooves going, try to find a place where it feels good, and then try to get together with the rhythm section players and do some listening so that you all have a similar basis of information and understanding about music. Listen to just about anything, and that will always come back and amplify the ability of the big band to play together, because the rhythm section, if the rhythm section is not playing together and is not coalescing, the big band's not going to coalesce. So that's it for me today. I wish you luck, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me here at the University of Montana. Thanks.